Hello and welcome to Transforming Worlds.
That there are many different visions for the future, and there's not just one pathway, but if we can get them so that they're aligned and moving in the same direction, and it really links to that acausal space that connects us, and that's, we can describe it in many ways, but it is like of, values like equity and compassion and justice and even courage. It's just like what applies to everybody, to the whole. And to me, that is how we move towards this like a fractal approach to scaling change, where each individual is part of the collective.
In today's episode, we speak to Karen O'Brien. Karen is a professor of human geography at the University of Oslo in Norway and the co-founder of cCHANGE, a company committed to empowering and activating organizations and people to engage in equitable and sustainable transformations. Karen has an incredibly inspiring and actionable manner of writing about complexity. She does this with passion, commitment, and eloquence, being one of the most cited researchers in her field and a sought-after lecturer. Her goal is to contribute to a quantum leap towards an equitable world where all of life can thrive. She's been thinking and writing about climate change for a very long time, and she's participated in 4 reports for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. She has been the co-recipient in 2020 of the prestigious BBVA Foundation's Frontiers of Knowledge Awards for Climate Change. She is the author of an incredible amount of articles and books, but especially You Matter More Than You Think, an incredible book about quantum social change. So let's dive in to an incredible conversation with Karen about why each of us matters more than we think and what the keys are to understand that. Tune in. Welcome, Karen, to Transforming Worlds. How are you today?
Good, thanks. Really nice to be with you, Carola.
Yeah, same here. So tell us, what is transforming in your life these days?
Oh, there's a lot that's transforming for me. I'm in the middle of a transition, moving out of the university and into a different stage of life, moving into what I refer to as preferment. So I feel like I'm in the middle of a big transformation amidst the global transformation we're experiencing.
Preferment?
Preferment, it's where I'm moving into a space where I will like choose what I want to do, and over the next 30 days, like how can I have the biggest impact given what we're going through right now as a planet, and create space, the depth and the breadth of space for myself to actually show up and engage with transformative change fully.
That is amazing. It sounds like incredible, and it sounds like something we should all be doing
Yeah.
because that's where it's at, really.
Yeah.
Um,
It was Dr. Dan Siegel who gave me the word. I was talking about retirement, and he said, no, you're going into preferment. And I really, and whenever I say that, a lot of people recognize that that is something that it resonates much more than, because retirement has a very like kind of winding down, and I feel like I'm kind of winding up in many ways.
right. Dan Siegel. I'm a big fan of Dan Siegel, primarily because in my personal life in the past few years, I've had a lot to do with neurology. And I started diving deep into his work and also the importance of meditation. I hope that's also part of your preferment.
Hmm. Absolutely. And having the time to do more meditation
Yeah.
and really engaging in, like how do we, what Dan calls intra-connected, how do we really like put that into being in the world and shaping new patterns in society. So it's very I'm actually like in a great space, but it is a transition and it is a transformation. And so that is, I feel like it's the micro and the macro meeting each other um,
Yes.
on
Yeah, and it's
forefront.
switching gears as well, isn't it? Because
Mhm.
your engagement at the university and kind of continuously being aware of the expectations really of the outside world changes you, it changes me, changes everyone.
Mhm.
And now that is open. So it's like
Mhm.
you're diving into the present moment.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And I think it's really exciting because, it's like I love my job. I love teaching. I
Yes.
love researching. And I just spent the last 3 years as co-chair of the biodiversity panel. IPBES, intergovernmental panel, co-chairing the Transformative Change Assessment. And so, like, how do we really like take what we know and put it into practice? So I really want to dedicate the next decades towards scaling transformative change for a just and sustainable world and creating these like fractals of change that really work together to to be something that we can't even imagine right now. And yeah, but I think to do that, we have to. I think I need to have the courage to get out of my comfort zone as well as
Why
yeah.
is that? Why do you need courage?
Well, it's very easy to stay, like I have a very like because I love what I'm doing and it's a very a comfortable position, and yet it is also somewhat constraining, and I feel that I feel like I just have the sense that it's time to move on. And I co-founded an organization called cCHANGE 10 years ago, working with society to, like really engage people and promote transformations to sustainability. So I feel like there's a lot of untapped potential there, and that yeah, taking the science seriously of what we know about, for example, climate change and biodiversity loss and global inequality. I don't think that business as usual and research as usual are sufficient, and I think it's important. But I feel that like we really do. We are in the decade that matters, and we have such a short time, a window of opportunity. And I think many people realize this, but they don't really understand like the how of transformation. We can understand it very
In the abstract?
in the abstract, but what does it mean in practice?
Yeah.
And to talk about it in practice, I feel like I need to put it into practice. I need to live sustainably. I need to live in this way. And so that to me is really it's it's a challenge, and all challenges do take some courage to because yeah, we need to go beyond fears, or I need to go beyond fears and move into a space of the unknown. And that is what quantum social change is about. It's really like embracing uncertainty to realize our full potential.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say that's where transformation begins. Transformation starts at the end of what we know. And then it begins, because only when we can walk into that space and be there can we hold the transformation that needs to emerge. But it's a hard thing to do on one's own. So what is the role of community for you in this change that you're going through?
I think community is essential, because that goes back into this idea that sometimes we just feel like we're separate individuals, but we're always part of a community, and we're always part of needing the changes to happen together. We need the scaffolding. We need to have people to talk to, and especially in times of crisis, that we can't hold it alone. And communities of practice, and really being able to hold it and engage with not just like-minded people, but people who really care, and can show us what I'm missing. We like being able to like bring together different perspectives becomes really important.
Hmm. And how much of that conversation and bring together of perspectives is about what's wrong, and how much of that is about what's possible?
I think that's, that we can find like what the fault is and what's
Yeah.
missing and everything. And we can go on, forever about what we did wrong, or what we could do better. But I think having like being able to see the potential in the moment is, I think it really is like a skill and a practice that we need to work on together. And that was one thing that came out of the Transformative Change Assessment, in terms of like that, that there are many different visions for the future. And there's not just one pathway. But if we can get them so that they're aligned and moving in the same direction, and it really links to that acausal space that connects us, and that's, we can describe it in many ways, but it is like of, values like equity and compassion and justice, and even courage. It's just like what applies to everybody, to the whole. And to me, that is how we move towards this like a fractal approach to scaling change, where each individual is part of the collective and is part of the systems that we're trying to move.
Would you like to guide us through the history of how you got there? Because I've known you for some time and I've followed your work for some time, but for our listeners, this is new, and I think particularly your book, "You Matter More Than You Think," had me gasping for air,
Mhm.
crying. laughing and giggling, everything in between, because of the how profound it is when you talk about quantum social change. And clearly, you've been going through all of these kind of waves of understanding that led you here. It would be lovely if, like, you can, in sort of brushstrokes, paint for us a picture of how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, well, I've been working on climate change for more than 35 years since I was a student, and I was very just, just really engaged with what does this mean for humans? What does it mean for society? So looking at the social and human dimensions, as well as the biophysical aspects of it, because it really is, the impacts are going to be profound, and looking at how it intersects with globalization processes, what it means for human security, how do we adapt, why are we vulnerable? All of those things really, they fascinated me, and yet I realized slowly that I was more interested in the change part than the climate, or as much
Mm,
as in change, and really interested in, yeah, who we as individuals and groups, how do we really change? And it probably hit a point where the recognizing what it actually means for humanity in the future, what climate change, both now and in the future, I started to really look at well, we really do need to not to be transformed by climate change, but to actually deliberately transform rather than just simply adapt to these changes little by little and hoping that things will be better. And it really moves us from a very kind of reactive, let's just cope and survive in this, into let us, how do we create a world where we can all thrive? And in that time, when I started to maybe it was about 15 years ago, get interested in transformations to sustainability, I also came across people working on quantum social science, and that opened up a whole range of ideas. It's like, wow, what if we are actually limiting ourselves by thinking about issues like climate change from a very reductionistic, atomistic, deterministic paradigm? And of course, indigenous knowledge and wisdom traditions have been
mm,
telling us that, but that science itself is telling us that reality is not what it seems, and that, by definition, then, social reality is not what it seems, because we're part of this. We use the metaphors, we use the methods, and we have shared meanings about the nature of reality. So for me, it was very much like a opening up and engaging and asking questions. And the You Matter More Than You Think book was really an inquiry into what does this actually mean for how we approach social change? And that is still my ongoing inquiry, because I think we are collectively underestimating our capacity for social change by reducing ourselves to individuals and what we do and our carbon footprints and things, rather than seeing our potential as a collective that can actually, we are the systems and we can move and shape the systems, and that there's a quality of our agency that really literally matters in terms of substance and significance.
yeah, yeah. It's absolutely true. For me, it's the reason why, I'm a nonfiction author. I suppose it's my own nerdiness and my need to kind of
Mhm.
understand and explain, and in so doing, right. And this year, for the first time, I wrote a piece of fiction, and I have two characters in that book, change and transformation. And their names are Delta and Anteia because they come from Greek words signifying change and transformation. And these are, for me, have become increasingly two completely different things. Change being on the outside and contextual and inevitable, and transformation being from the inside and led by that sense of agency and uplifting hope of transforming things, helping them change form into something
Mhm.
different and something better. But that is still in a culture like the cultures we live in and the societies we live in. It's very difficult to kind of wriggle oneself loose from this idea that we have to conform, not transform.
Mhm.
When you talk about us being able to do this as a collective, what is it that we need to ignite in ourselves? What is this understanding or this inquiry that needs to emerge through us, do you think?
That's a great question. And I think I love your distinction between transformation and change as inner and outer. And I think looking at, seeing how they are actually part, they're part of each other,
Yes,
and that the
yes.
inner and the outer are so changes. So to me, that is like we have a really nice word in Norwegian called ildsjæl, the burning soul. And I think we all have that, but there's like a flame in us. And that is where like the capacity to actually take care of ourselves and others, and to recognize that we can do better and to light that flame in people. And that is where many people who are engaged in, living in this world and really not feeling like they matter, not feeling like they can, what they do actually influences the whole. And that's really the nature of climate change too, that it's really quite phenomenal
Defeatist.
to think about. Yeah, but to think that like that we as human beings are contributing to transforming the climate system, the hydrologic system, ice, everything, and that then we underestimate that we can actually transform economic systems, social systems, political systems as well, because like each individual's actions are entangled with the actions of others, that, through language, through meaning, through shared visions for the future. So that's, to really like ignite that sense of individual agency, collective agency, political agency, and to work towards a world that works for everyone, as Buckminster Fuller pointed out years ago. I
Mhm.
think that is where what I aspire to see, recognizing that it won't be easy, that there will be challenges along the way. But part of it, as you say, is like, how do we, going inward, how do we get out of our own way with
Yeah.
our own challenges to work on societal challenges?
Because I think the key there is like how do we amass the quantum field, right? So Bucky Fuller was a living and breathing example of his work. He was not a theorist. He wrote, but he lived by
Mhm.
what he believed in. I mean, he really was literally building the dome in his backyard. He was literally believing that this earth can sustain us as part of sort of biodiversity in abundance. And he was proving this, through everything he did. Every single experiment, every single iteration was leading to again try and prove this belief, which he scientifically managed as hypothesis. So he was able to get, out of his own way and look at his ideas and try and prove them. But he was not able to create the collective, burning flame you just talked about, to ignite that in his time.
Mhm.
So is there something now that is different in terms of as in German, they call that the Zeitgeist, right? So the spirit of the era. Is there something different that if, say, Bucky Fuller were alive today, this would ignite more quickly or differently, do you think?
Yeah, I think I was actually just like when I teach, I always end the course with a Buckminster Fuller quote on I think it goes, if the success or failure of this planet and of human beings depended on me and on how I am and what I do, it would be like, how would I be? What would I do? And I think now in this, the zeitgeist would be again like, how would I and we, or we, as Dan Siegel calls it, how would we be together, like as individuals and collectives? And that we have the internet now. We have so much more of a global awareness, and that is, like it's amazing that when we're becoming self-aware that we are part of a much larger system. More so, I think he was, did pioneering work, and in treating his life as an experiment, he showed the potential and the possibility. And now I think we're, like us slow learners are catching up and going like, yeah, we can actually generate a world that is different, and that gives us a sense of free will, a sense of agency and potentiality. But it's not, it's very much shaped by the systems and the structures that we've created in society, and how we choose to organize. And what we see right now is that I think many people are waking up to realize that if they don't engage, if we all don't engage, that other people will decide. And that question of who decides the future, whose values count, becomes very important, not just for us now, but for future generations. Because people will look back and just go, what were they thinking, back then in 2025? What, where, and I think the idea that we are entangled, and the idea of oneness, and the idea that we are, we are nature. This is all really emerging now, and it's
Yes.
so it's ripe for a radical revolution of a whole different type. And then radical is getting to the root causes, and revolution and evolution, not just as repeating the same, but really moving forward in a different way.
Yeah, yeah, and it's true as you say that the spirit of the times has such an imprint on that because famously Jane Goodall said about pesticides, "What were we thinking putting poison on our food?" But she was there too, but she can only
Mhm.
say it now. So clearly something is being ignited in us, in our consciousness, in our ability to question our own doing, choices,
Mhm.
behavior, because those choices were implicit and passive and are becoming now visible through their impact and consequences that we look back and say, hey, where did that come from? And it turns
Mhm.
out it was us. I mean, I'm not blaming Jane Goodall of all people, right? This is not about a blame game, but it's about our ability to ask that question where we couldn't see it before. And this seems to be very much something that is happening in the now and something where we can help each other in the quantum change, in the social change
Mhm.
space.
Mhm.
Where do you look to
Yeah.
for inspiration, Karen?
Oh gosh, everywhere. I think that there is just so much happening, and sometimes, you can feel like, oh, I'm all alone, or, we can feel that we're not part of this larger whole. But then when you start to look online and you start to read, and many people are saying the exact same things. Many people have said the same things for centuries, for millennia, and we're all part of a much larger movement. And that gives me a lot of inspiration because, yeah, stepping outside of my own little paradigm or box or things like that is I discover that, like, oh, there's a lot of people here, and there are just, like millions of fractals of change happening around the world. There's so much going on, and it's a little bit off the radar and out of sight because we all are looking at the world through our lenses with our filters and our blind spots. And the more I work with that in my own transformation and see where, what I was blind to, then I get a real aha moment, and a different world opens up, and think like, wow, there's a lot of people doing amazing things. And science is coming up with experiment after experiment after experiment that is challenging. It's supporting a quantum worldview, and connecting consciousness and, the mind matter, or mind body matter, the connections. Yeah, science itself is engaging with consciousness, and it's having a way to look at our, like, the connections between mind and matter, and subjects and objects, and really what we think is real. And there's so many different interpretations of quantum physics and perspectives. And what I think is really important is to ask the questions, keep asking those questions, because we haven't, there's no one answer, and there's lots of possible things. But what we know is that the reality, the material reality of things in space, where we are separate from nature, we are separate from each other, and we are just like objects, to be changed in the name of something, is outdated. And what we're realizing is that we are the subjects of change. We are the verbs, we are the actions that are creating the world.
So many questions. You're igniting all of these questions. Oh, it's so beautiful. So when you talk about subject and object, what is the role of matter?
Yeah, well, I think matter is something that is really like this substance that we can really, like, see, and it's the object that of our attention, and the subject is separate from that in a classical Newtonian paradigm.
Right.
So we've pulled the subject and object separate, and we see that it's also in language, English language, and many languages are like subject, object, and we don't have the word for, how would it be if we were together as one. And many indigenous languages do have that. Many other languages, Japanese, for example, see humans and nature as one. And so when we separate subjects and objects, then it's very easy to turn people into objects to be changed in the name of climate change, in the name of whatever the agenda is, rather than activate that sense of agency and create people as subjects of their own lives and subjects of collective well-being. And that is what I think we need to tap into, is like, how do we move people so that they feel part of the whole, and that we create I consider it like a You Matter movement, which isn't a traditional social movement, but it is that recognition, the igniting the sparks that help people to see that like, yeah, what I do, what we do actually matters in a sense, in that objective sense.
Yeah.
Because we live in a world where we need to see measurable results. We need to bend the curves. Ice melts at certain temperatures, and sea level will rise. And there is a world that we share that we need to, at least I believe, that we need to take care of in a way that can ensure that future generations can also thrive.
And you talked about your personal transformation. So you said, as you looked at these things, it's also transforming you. How does that interact? So the transformation you're seeing on the outside, you're researching, you're inquiring about, and your own inquiry towards yourself and meaning, for lack of a better word, or mattering.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think in many ways, like, what we do research on is the stuff that we're working on, and working on vulnerability to climate change or human security. It's like there are reflections of the things that are really deeply important to me, what I deeply care about, and I think the whole inquiry into mattering comes down to what I share with many people is like, do I matter? Does all the work that we've been doing actually make a difference? Are we, what is the nature of reality? And that inquiry, there's so many different ways to go into that, but it's I think I have to ask myself deep questions and explore, because yeah, it's about continually challenging my assumptions about the nature of reality, and to be opening up rather than shutting down, because like, being willing to say, I don't know, and
Yeah.
then, but what if we look at it this way? What if we do this way? And that's where I think inquiry is really like a powerful approach to transformation, rather than just having like, we have transition recipe books and how, the pathways and the blueprints and things, but that's not going to get us there. It is really going to be seeing that the changes that we want are not going to be the changes that happen. Like, we have to be able to be adaptive and flexible, and recognize that there will be the outcomes will be unexpected, but how do we create the like, move in the direction that we collectively that works for all of us.
And why is this that the outcomes would be unexpected?
Well, I think because we're in a complex system, and like, in a very
Mm,
linear causal thing, where this causes this, and that we just, like, where we can really model and plan for the society, then that's kind of the way that science works. Like, this is what the projections are, this is where we're heading, and there's much to be said for the modeling exercises, but often they don't include like the depth of human capacities. They don't include culture and social change in it well. So that is where again, we're not, we have some freedom and room for maneuver
yeah,
in this. And in the current, there's a real pushback against that, because obviously, in existing systems, that where some people are benefiting tremendously from the way we've organized society, and with the
right.
concentration of power and wealth, and focusing on short-term benefits, individual benefits and material benefits. It's we will see winners and losers. So to actually activate those changes, we have to really be willing to do things differently, and step outside of the paradigms that we're
Yeah, yeah. And
formed
that's why
by.
for me in my work area as a designer, I follow the work of Herbert Simon, who was the former dean of the Carnegie Mellon School of Design. And he famously wrote a book that was called Sciences of the Artificial, which, of course, set in the time, I'm talking late 60s. What he was pointing at is that the hard sciences are phenomenological, but that means they explore phenomena in the actual world. And for me, the label I'm going to sort of paste on that is output. So when you write an equation and there is an answer to it, that is an output. Now, when we look at the softer sciences, or the veil that we've been able to move away with quantum physics, and the more fluid understanding of life in all its forms, and particularly the organized bit, which is what he referred to as artificial sciences of the artificial, sciences of the constructs that we've created to organize, understand, categorize, etc. When we start becoming playful with that, that is the act of design. And in the words of Herbert Simon, to design is to transform existing conditions into preferred ones. Not just different ones, but preferable for everyone, for life, for us. And when I look at that, the label that I put there is outcome. Outcome as different from output, right? Mm. So for me, that's what fascinates me about your work. And I think that you're helping me kind of dive into this bit, that there is this layer of rational, logical, argumentative understanding. And then there is this layer of the fractal, unexplained, fluid, morphing. And these two things are coming together in the type of research that you do. Can you unwrap that for me a bit more?
Sure,
Is
yeah.
that too hard of a question? But I feel like you get this to a degree that I'm not there yet.
I love your definition of preferment, of how do we, or
Yeah.
how do we create that world that we prefer?
Yes.
And then I think to me, it is about, to answer your question in a very simple way, it's like straddling both worlds, because we are in a classical world where we do experience these, like we have these experiences. We are we are emotionally attached to people and to things, to nature, etc. And yet then we also have this more subtle, more patterned approach, where how do we actually change our patterns? How do we change the patterns through which we're organizing society, and how do we shift those, like it's, people like, oh, it's resonance, it's vibration and everything. How do we connect that with like the classical world we live in, where power, politics, interests is really trying to stifle people and treating people and life as expendable? So
Yeah.
that tension between the two, I think that's, like it's very easy for me to go off on a meditation course and feel very good about like, oh, this, I can, feel the, like, well, there's this oneness and everything. But then there is also the world we're seeing that we read about, and how do that we do need to actually take care of people who are being displaced from their homes because of violence, extreme events, you name it now. And so, like, to have collective responsibility, or the ability to responsibility recognizes that we are entangled, or correlated to each other, correlated, that what one person does, we're part of this larger whole. So it's really to be able to hold that both and perspective, and straddle the different worlds, and then have the biggest, as you say, like, to create the outcomes we want to see in the world, to have the impacts that all of us, or many of us, really feel are important in terms of the future of people and the planet. And it's not just to push things into the future, but it's to recognize that right here and right now we can bring that future and create that, because right now, there's a lot of people who are not thriving on the planet.
You talk about ripples and ponds. And for me, that metaphor, or that analogy, really expresses the difficulty of the paradox. So we are inside systems, and the inertial power of that system is humongous. Like, you can't will yourself out of a system. So talk to us about ripples and ponds, and that you've worked with someone who's done beautiful illustrations as well of your work. So I'm actually seeing these illustrations as I speak. Um, how does that work? What is the effect of the ripple on the pond and the pond and the ripple?
Yeah, well, I think that like the ripple effects, we talk about those is like these are our again the like when we do something, we send out a resonance, and it's very easy to be thinking in terms of we shall that our ripple shall influence somebody else, but it is again there's something that is very unseen about the non-local, non-linear connections that we have with others, and the idea that we are connected, that we don't have to connect, that we already are connected, I think is very powerful. And if we can start to create yeah, from like the if we're in a pond and that when we one little drop of change creates these ripples that intersect and interact with others or intra-act with others positively and negatively, sometimes canceling each other out and sometimes amplifying each other. And what we want to do now is really amplify the positive changes in the world and really like neutralize all the negative ones. So how do we then, how do I show up? How do I engage so that I can, like create that the ripples, the resonance with people that, especially people that don't necessarily see the world the same way as me, and that's our challenge now because many people are hoping that everyone will have a shift in consciousness very quickly, but I think what we're trying to say is, how do we connect with people and what they care about deeply right here and right now, not just for themselves, but for everyone, and really use that as the point of departure for because it's very powerful. And going back to the artwork that in the book, my collaboration with Norwegian artist Tone Bjørdam, it was really beautiful because, like, to create those ripple effects, I was like, oh, there are ripple effects, but she looked at thousands of photographs and really engaging with nature, engaging with like exactly what is going on in nature, and then recognizing that we are nature too, that we're made up of water, bacteria, minerals, now plastic, and there's that we're not this, the idea that there's a lot that we can take metaphorically from
Hmm.
nature, but there's a lot of the experiences that then are really writing on the wall for us to look at in terms of how soil and microbes and trees and everything respond to change. I think we can learn a lot from that too.
Yeah, yeah. I'm intrigued by what you said about amplifying and neutralizing because I think culturally we tend to talk a lot about the amplification. Some two bads make worse, two goods make better,
Mhm.
very simply put. But then there is this neutralization, which to me is about us becoming adults as humanity, meaning sometimes we behave like toddlers as a collective.
Mhm.
Maybe in the peace of our homes and our own sanctuaries, we feel very centered, but then going out in the world and staying centered is a whole different
Mhm.
thing. So, how does this neutralizing work?
Yeah. Well, I think for me personally, like Vipassana meditation, there's a lot of like wisdom in, like kind of not having cravings, not desires, and being able to just meet the moment with equanimity
Yes.
is, and that is a practice because it's hard because we have a tendency to react. We have a tendency to, to just really desire, including desiring a sustainable and equitable world. I feel that that's
Yeah.
to let go of the like let go of the outcomes and hold them lightly and with humor, with love, with a different energy is the challenge for us right now because it's very easy to others. It's
Yes.
very easy to just like just say like that's good, that's bad, and label things from our perspective. But as we see in the political world right now, what I think is positive and good, other people are saying like no, that's if climate change can be seen as a security threat, the word addressing climate change responses, then like we are living in very different worlds. And if I'm trying to impose my world on others, we end up with that, like it becomes an us versus them battle.
Hmm.
And, there's people have, with power and weapons and things, it could get, it's the outcome of that seems to be potentially very, very dangerous. So how do we do things differently? How do we show up differently? How do we connect with people who we are already connected to? And those are like the questions that I'm answering. And how do we do that at scale? It's really like the what we found in the transformative change assessment. We emphasize that it's not just the scale of change, like the big scale change, but it is like incremental change. If it addresses the underlying causes of nature's decline, then it actually is contributing to these large scale changes. So many small changes can contribute to a large change, but it's the quality of change that makes a difference. And so going back to, like, how do we neutralize? It's like, how can I have a quality that isn't exacerbating the polarization and the fragmentation in the world? And how can I be a fractal of change, that has an impact, beyond multiple spheres of influence and beyond what I can actually like measure and recognize? Because who knows?
So sometimes we use words and we feel like everybody knows what we're talking about. And one of those words is fractals. What do you mean by fractals?
Yeah. Well, fractals are very cool. They're self-similar patterns that repeat again and again, regardless of scale. So they're kind of ascalar. You can create them through algebra, through geometry, and they just like this, the micro is in the macro, is in the macro, is in the macro, and you could go on infinitely. But we also see them in nature, where we see that, leaf patterns and coastal patterns and rivers and trees and things, they follow a certain pattern. And of course, it's infinite in nature, but there's a wisdom of replicating again and again. And in terms of social fractals, these are patterns that are based on values that apply to everyone, not abstract values, but what do we do in practice? And so that makes it very context specific. It's not about replication and, like kind of just doing the same thing, but within a given context, how do we create these patterns that work for the people there, for the nature there, and then are also consistent with the well-being of the whole? And that's where many fractals fragment, because we end up, doing things that, like Norway feels very green, but then we're looking, we're dependent on oil and we're selling the oil and we're perpetuating a fossil fuel based model of our economic growth and development, which then is fragmenting our possibilities and potentials. So yeah, so fractals and social fractals, people talk about fractal politics, urban fractals, and sustainability fractals, things. And I just think we need a fractal approach to scaling social change as a way of repatterning the world in a different way.
Could you say that the fractal is like a constituent part of a wave? Is that too much of a
Yeah.
nerdy idea?
Yeah.
Because
What would you mean by
I
that?
was triggered by what you were saying about sort of this expansive
Hmm.
capacity of the fractal to infinitely sort of
Hmm.
like if you were in old world speak, like a
Hmm.
radio signal that's echoing something and
Hmm.
multiplying and multiplying and so if you carry that visual forward, it's like a wave that keeps unfolding
Yeah.
and keeps
Yeah.
copying this.
Hmm.
So said otherwise, if we come back to the fractal, then it's a collapsed potential. It's a collapsed wave, and it becomes the lens through which
Hmm.
we are seeing that as the only possibility. And now I'm talking about quantum social change. So the social,
Hmm.
the artificial science aspect, the construct, the kind of flattened understanding
Hmm.
of something that is multiple and diverse.
Yes.
But
Hmm.
I was thinking as you were speaking, well, the fractal is really just one of many possibilities, and that's why there are many fractals. And it's us who choose which ones to signify, amplify, adopt, impose, turn into dogma. And so I could carry on with this kind of concept. And I was thinking, is there a way in reverse to say, can we collapse like we do. Like when we die, we become compost, and the energy in Einstein terms is returned to the whole and changes again. So can we, as we undo ourselves of these dogmas, of these constructs, of these ideas, can we return them to the pond
Hmm.
so that
Yeah.
they can become wave again and sort of collapse into fractals in new ways? But again, probably digressing away from our conversation into nerdy land.
I love nerd conversations. Yeah. No, it's really cool to think about these things and think about what those possibilities are and how, like every fractal does radiate outward. It creates like outward waves, but then yeah, we can also collapse it in, and that's where I think wholeness becomes important. And as
Yes,
David Bohm, wholeness in the implicate order, that there's that if we're fragmented inside, and if we're fragmented in our communities, and if we're fragmented in our project groups, in our organizations, or whatever, that then it's very difficult to create those beautiful fractals that are like that have integrity. And I
yes,
think integrity is a really important word here, because it's like that integrity doesn't, it means wholeness. So how do we create a world of integrity
yes,
when there's so many people that are pushing to like kind of fragment and move us into the a collection of fragments that coexist and fight and compete for little pieces of something bigger, rather than recognizing that, wow, we're part of as part of the whole, we want everyone to have enough and
yeah,
be able to thrive.
yeah. Do we have examples, or do you have examples in nature or maybe in society where this is already happening, where this is already working, where we can get inspiration from?
Yeah, I think there's examples everywhere. And in the Transformative Change Assessment, we had like 390 case studies of like where transformative potential is really high and where it's happening. And the one that I worked closely with was the National Maasai Conservancy in Kenya, where they are working on, their National means coexistence. So they're using values of dignity and kind of like um, self-determination, compassion, all of these values to design a different type of conservancy beyond, like conservation beyond conservancy. So they've taken down the fences, and it took a matter of years before wildlife started to return. They're working on educating women and girls and cleaning the rivers and taking care of their neighbors during COVID, for example. They fed thousands of people. So it's a really great example of the possibility and the potential for doing things differently in a new way. And it's being looked at, and, people are coming to say, oh, how can we create our own, like, version of the National Maasai Conservancy? And yet it also faces the barriers in terms of financing and funding, because our funding models do not favor small scale examples and experiments and things that work. It's easier for development agencies or foundations and things to fund the big ideas that are going to produce mega results, rather than the little ideas that are going to have profound results.
Mm-hmm. If you had a magic wand, right now, and you could say, okay, let's start here, and you can pick three things that we need to start doing as humanity, as a collective, to, help ignite this quantum social change, would those three things be?
Ooh, great question. No one's given me the wand before, the
Here,
quantum
here.
wand.
This is the wand.
Okay. Yeah, three things that I think could ignite this. I think that getting people to lighten up, I think, or
Ah,
like to be able to like that I'd say, abracadabra, let's not take things so seriously, and that's myself included, because we tend to not see the possibilities and the potentials when we're very like focused on just the a particular collapsed output or outcome that we want, rather than seeing the opening up to the possibility. So I think I would lighten up, and I think also my thing would be to just ask question. It would be just a giant question mark, so that we would get curious. We would get, to start to look at the world in, through different eyes, through the eyes of a young explorer, for example, that, a child who sees things fresh and sees I sometimes think that, like, oh, we're in such a crisis because of these things, but you look out there and it's like we have so much beauty. We have so much, there's so many wonderful things going on. So how do we get more of that and less of the things that are really working to destroy that, and, taking care of things. And then my third thing would be, I think, to be able to connect the quantum social change with the deeper work that we're doing at a collective level that's going on now about, like stopping traumatizing people and healing trauma. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be very difficult to get to wholeness when we're still bombing um, people, cities, countries, and everything. And I think that to be able to take wisdom into action, we need people to be able to show up fully or more fully, and so, yeah, I think the lightness and the depth of healing trauma is going to be really important, because otherwise we're going to be just very much like collapsed into like a zombie-like existence. And
Mm.
that's we need to awaken the ilchel, the burning souls, to generate the changes we want to see.
And is there a sort of a positive way to word the depth of the trauma healing? Because we're defining it through the trauma. Like, what
Mhm.
is it we need to do instead of?
Yeah. Well, as a friend of mine, Christina Bethel, who wrote the foreword to the book, she works on flourishing and
Yeah.
positive
Yeah.
experiences. So she's an expert on adverse childhood experiences and traumas and things, but her work really highlights that even just one small positive experience can be life-changing for people. One person who sees somebody, who
Yes.
listens, who connects, that can have such a disproportionate impact on people's lives. So it's not then that, we have to send everyone to therapy, but it's like, how do we create more of those positive, good experiences? How do we take care of our children, our communities, our elderly, our nature, everything? And to me, that is like we have to enter that space from a space of flourishing and wholeness. And so every single person that can be working towards this, it's like you matter more than you think, because you're having an impact that is well beyond just the little individual reductionist, measurable impacts into something that you can't even see.
Yeah, I love that. I've always been a glass half full person, and I come from a tradition of medical doctors in my ancestry, who naturally, especially for the allopathic medicine, had to focus on what was wrong in the world. So the you know the half
Mhm.
empty half of the
Mhm.
glass, and it doesn't make them any less wonderful people. I mean, I love my family for sure, but I'm so excited about this time because in my personal life, I've really have to had to fight for my creativity and my joyfulness and my need to bring flourishing and beauty into the world. And I really feel I've been in a long search for what is post growth, because I don't like, just like I did with you just now, I don't like things defined by the negative, because it's
Mhm.
disempowering. It's saying, oh, it's not that. Okay,
Mhm.
fine. Okay, we get it. But how do we turn the page? By being active, by being engaged, not by not doing something. Otherwise, we
Mhm.
can't. We become paralyzed, we become static. And that's not the purpose of life, is it? And so when we think about an analogy with nature, flourishing is indeed the phase in the natural cycle that follows growth. So if you look at, say, now, because of it's springtime in the northern hemisphere and we're having all of these blossoms out, when fruit trees start blossoming is because they are not growing. They can't do both at the same time. So grow, grow,
Mhm.
grow, grow, grow. For example, a lemon tree takes 12 years, and then it can bear fruit, because in between the two is the moment of flourishing. So I love your three abracadabras.
Mhm.
So lightening up, asking questions and engaging with curiosity and flourishing even in the small things, because that's going to ignite and bear fruit further
Mhm.
down the road. Beautiful.
Mhm.
Thank you
Right.
so much.
Yeah, and I think we can all contribute to the conditions for
Oh,
lightening up,
yes.
the conditions for curiosity, the conditions for flourishing, and that is like the important role of education and learning, and the internet plays such an important role in that now, in exposing people to different ways of seeing and being.
Yes, and also the courageous people like yourself who are daring to create alt spaces, something we don't know what that is. It's just an alternative. It's just something that if it's ready to flourish, it will. And
Mhm.
allowing for that space is an act of courage, because really we don't know. And
Exactly, we don't know.
at the same time, it's driven by a belief, by a longing, perhaps, of that it should be possible, and we won't know until we try. But yeah, it takes courage to try, because there is no guarantee. So, what
Exactly.
are the next things you're going to be working on? What are your next questions as you move into your next phase?
Yeah, no, I think I'm like, how do I use my creativity? How do I use what I like my what I've worked on for the last decades and put it to use in that lighter and more fun way? And how do I and we really guide this transformative change at a rate and a scale, a speed and a depth that's never been experienced before, and be part of it, not knowing what the outcome will actually be, not knowing if we will actually get there, but really knowing that we there's no option but to try
Mhm.
as a collective, and to take care, of the whole, because we will be remembered by future generations for what we did or didn't do. And I think, one exam question that I tend to give students is like, looking back from the future, like, what were they missing? What did they
Yeah.
not, where was the discourse, and what was emerging in that discourse that could have actually been strengthened or was being strengthened? So we're in a really exciting point. And one of my early professors of a course on extinctions of species said to me in graduate school, or said to the class, that we are alive at one of the most important times in history, when what we do can make the biggest difference. And I think that is so true today. And so it really is like more that to be like Buckminster Fuller and treat our lives as an experiment is,
Mm.
let's make it a fun experiment together.
So you've brought your students back from the future to look back, and I'm going to invite you to look forward. Imagine that
Okay.
we all adopt this Buckminster Fuller mentality of experimentation, and we do this in a joyful, light way with curiosity and flourishing. What might society look like in, say, 20 years if everyone were doing that? If the world was as it is dreamt by you?
Yeah. I guess in my vision, I'm not sure that everyone will be doing it, because I think we will have the contrast and things, but I think that we will be creating the conditions, whether it's, in society, where people are cared for, where people feel that they matter, where young people grow up and have that idea that they can do, that they are agents of change. They're the subjects of their lives, but not as individuals, but as also a part of a collective. So the I and we, or we, are is really the pronoun that we're looking at, and that we see our connection, and we see the potential, and we are in a regenerative state. We recognize that there were centuries of abuse of people on the planet that have to be like recovered, and we're doing it in ways that are like phenomenally um, effective.
Mhm, mhm. And what would that postcard from the future tell us then?
Mhm.
Your own exam question.
Yeah, yeah. I would have to say, oh, you matter more than you think. Go for it. It would just say that, like that, yeah, that the all the divides and the binaries and the things that kept us apart. Um, yeah, like we're beyond that illusion, because we've listened to indigenous and local knowledge, we've listened to wisdom traditions, and we've listened to science itself telling us this, and that it's, it's not rocket science. It's just really basic, and that going into what the transformation from within, that we actually hold this knowledge deeply within ourselves, and that it is that it can release this space of much more lightness and fun, and not just like a mechanistic, let's just change the world because we have to kind of energy, but like let's change it because it's possible and we can thrive.
Yeah, I love that. So where can people find your work and find you, Karen, especially going forward as you're changing roles?
Yeah, well, I'm at the University of Oslo, so I will still have a web page because I'll be emerita. And I have cCHANGE.no, which is an organization that works with people in communities for engaging with transformations to sustainability. And I have a Substack newsletter on quantum social change, where it pushes me to keep asking questions and keep engaging with exactly these types of conversations, so that I can, like keep myself thinking about what's important and why we matter.
So is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, no, I think that I just thank you so much for having these conversations. It's really there's so much, there's so much that happens in dialogue and in conversations, that that even just reading and listen, we need each other. And I think that we're all part of a much bigger movement, and once we recognize that, then we can really think about, well, we are actually amplifying it word by word, conversation by conversation, and podcast by podcast.
Yeah, and that's why Transforming Worlds exists, precisely for that reason, to help amplify those voices and to show that transformation is possible. So thank you so much for being a part of this, Karen. It's been really enjoyable speaking to you. And, I've always been so inspired by your work, and it's so lovely to be able to ask you questions from the heart. Some questions I didn't know were going to emerge in the podcast, and they did. So thanks for being there and answering those and helping me look at that through your eyes. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Carola. It's been great to talk to you too.